shining star light as we close it out here. I have the great honor and pleasure to introduce our keynote that's going to be closing us today, Curtis Acosta. Here in Tucson, he's like a major luminary, but it isn't just in Tucson. Across the nation, he's been speaking on behalf of the struggle. It's amazing we still have to do this, but the struggle to maintain ethnic studies programs in districts across the country. You are here in Arizona, those of you that have come from somewhere else, into a hotbed of controversy around whether or not it's constitutionally okay to offer ethnic studies to kids who want to know more about different cultures, whether it be their own or others. So you're right there, you're right in the middle of it. And we just this week, a major historical moment in this whole struggle in San Francisco, and Curtis will be telling us about this. We were in circuit court appealing the law that Arizona set up to kind of ban ethnic studies if it didn't follow certain criteria, and the criteria is just outlandish. And hopefully those guys will rule, the three men that are judges, they will rule in favor of holding on to children's constitutional right to hear the truth about what's going on in their country. So, I'm going to let Curtis kind of tell you more about who he is, but he is certainly Tucsonian, and he represents us very well. Curtis, thank you for being who you are. Here's Curtis Acosta.
Well, thank you very much, Santo and Carrie, Joanne, for the invitation. It's an honor. It's been an exciting week. We'll talk about that in a second. And I hope you had a really great couple of days here and enjoyed the weather, because it's a dry heat. And so it's nice in January. And so without further ado, welcome to Tucson. Oh, wrong way. We'll get to that one.
Now let's talk about something a little more controversial, and that is in the Tucson Unified School District, we have the La Raza Ethnic Studies program. This was something that was sort of you inherited as you came into office. You created, I believe, a commission to study that, or a board to study that. They reported back, and now the decision has come down that Tucson is out of compliance, and they stand to lose funding if they don't pull that program. Bring us up to date. Where are we, and what does the future look like?
Well, one thing I want to tell people a little bit about what our strategy was. When we came into office, we felt like we had to do a professional job. And we also know that in these kind of situations, you can very quickly, as a conservative, end up with a lot of forces against you, and you can be defeated in your mission. And we don't feel like we're in the entertainment business. We are in the winning values business. And so we very carefully laid out our strategy. And when we were doing this, I thought back on how I had read about conflicts over time, and it's a military analogy. But I did a little reading on the Romans, and when Queen Boudica encountered the Romans in England, she just attacked, and boy, it was one heck of a charge. And it was with the full glory and everything, and she got slaughtered. She outnumbered the Romans 5-1, and they completely killed everybody. And so when we encountered this situation, we did what Hannibal did to the Romans, and when Hannibal encountered the Romans, he stretched them out. And so what we did is we took the time to very carefully, at a minute level, look at the evidence in detail and build our case at finite element by finite element. And so we elaborately built our case. We stretched them out for a whole year. During that year, they lost an enormous number of their Mexican American study students. They had to continue to defend themselves in the press. And then when we finally encountered them in court, it was a knockout punch, and we were able to clearly present our case and show that in fact there was a lot of inappropriate activity, inappropriate teaching in that classroom, that in fact was not ethnic studies at all. In fact, it went way out of those bounds. And so as a result, we were able to win that case in court, and so they have shut that program down.
And there are some that feel that they're trying to continue this on sort of under the radar. Are they having any success in keeping this going without really drawing too much attention, or have we shut it down?
Well, when it comes to their official classes, it has been shut down. Now there are a couple different things that are going on. This is the battle, this is the eternal battle of all time, the forces of collectivism against the forces of individual liberty, and we're a beautiful country because we have balanced those things. Now right now in our country, we're way out of balance. The forces of collectivism are suffocating us. It's a tidal wave that is threatening our individual liberties, and so we need to, at the national level, rebalance this, and we need to make sure that what's going on in our schools rebalances this. We have incredible philosophers that guided this nation. They weren't perfect people, but they created almost a perfect system of governance that has resulted in enormous freedom and enormous prosperity. And so we need to remember that. A lot of people are disparaging them because they weren't perfect people, but I said don't look at them as people. Look at the system that they created and what it has done for us all. Those are my philosophers, those are my guiding lights, and those are the principles that they established are the principles that guide my actions.
So, thank you, former state superintendent who was wrong. Man, how could I dare to articulate that as well? I want to make sure, because of the suffocating imbalance that we're in, the protectors of individual liberty their chance to speak about that before we have our evil collectivism community keynote today. This is the man, and I think it's really the reason why I wanted to start with this is because
Whoa.
The remix. It's the remix. If I was in the classroom and I knew I had to be like for a class period tomorrow, I would have done that for about 3 more minutes. Then we would have like passed this microphone around, did a little cipher, and it would be a good time. And then that would have been found in violation of teaching ethnic studies. Anyway, gosh, I don't know what I'm going to say for the remix. But it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Curtis Acosta, and I thought it was real important to start that way because this is how they speak about us. There's a few wonderful things, and I already took a little jab about that idea of this is the eternal battle of all time, that he said. But also, one moment that I really think is interesting. He goes, it wasn't ethnic studies at all. Like that man who just gave us, the wonderful Roman Queen Boudica and Hannibal, interesting historical account. I wonder what ethnic studies is to him anyway. I wonder, but I'm also scared. But that's how, this is where you're at. That is the man who, along with our former Attorney General Tom Horn, made us a piñata, or used us as a political football to gain, political opportunism. It was a way to win elections. But also, there's something a little bit more insidious when you get to hear what detail they go to and what's going through their mind. I think it's important for all of us to hear that this is the governance of our state, right, that you're in right now. These folks are everywhere, right? And it's important that we remember that or not, and we learn from this. And this is the way they speak about our children. It's like we need to conquer them, using military analogies. And in other keynotes I've given, I've parsed out all the military and violent language used against our students, and then I show a picture of our students as a dichotomy. But it's important for us, those of us that do this critical work, to keep this in mind. And there's one more thing that's also important, and that's this. So once we know that, once we're aware of that, how do we react? So this was my daily context as a high school teacher, with students that were being demonized and dehumanized in the media all over the state and beyond. While before the bell rang, and we were going to write an essay or something really controversial. We're going to critically read something beautiful or enjoy a wonderful poem. And this is the context for how we went to school every day. And it was tough. And so when they were making these disparaging comments, these dehumanizing comments, it was real important that we held on to our principles. So this is something that, in order for me to really start, because this is just rambling, and once we start, I'll feel a lot better. Because this is a poem that we would read every day in my classroom. We'd recite it every day in my classroom at Tucson High before school started, before class began. It was our way of triggering the beginning of our learning experience for that day together. Reminding ourselves why we're really there. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the unity clap. A little slow. We build up. Hold on. Then there's a phrase in Tagalog I'm going to teach you called isang bagsak. Isang bagsak. Now I'm only teaching it to you because you can take it with you. I'm the one that's going to say it. And when I say it, what we're going to do as the clap gets faster and faster and begins to kind of get out of rhythm and begin to diffuse, I'm going to yell out, Isang bagsak! And what it means in Tagalog is one thing down, one thing accomplished in movement work. Okay? And when you hear me say Isang bagsak, we've obviously gathered this from the Filipino community, and I learned this from folks doing similar work that we all do in San Francisco. And I thought it was like a nice historical homage to the United Farm Workers. You have the Chicano unit kind of, like when people hear the unity clap, they mostly think of Cesar and Dolores, right? They think of the UFW. But actually the Filipino community were the first to organize. So having Isang bagsak with the unity clap gives me what I call, we call goosebumps, but I call them nerd bumps. Nerd bumps are when you get excited in the classroom, right? You get goosebumps in an academic context. So go ahead, I want your nerd bumps to spread too along with Isang bagsak. So we're going to clap it up. I'm going to go Isang bagsak, and we're going to do one thing in unison. It's up to you, all right? Actually, it's one thing in solidarity in unison, but you get to choose. So you can either clap, stomp, or throw a grito, yell. Okay, that's up to you, all right? So this is a democracy. And what a democracy is we're Americans. You have to teach it. But no, I'm just teach democracy. So, but anyway, especially in Arizona. So you get to pick, all right? Stomp, clap, or yell, all right? Once I go, Isang bagsak. Are you ready? Okay. Now, once we do that, we're going to read In Lakesh together. And so I'm going to say In Lakesh. And then we're all going to read from Spanish to English across. All right? So you have to be sensitive. If some of us are better in English than others, some of us are better in Spanish than others. So get this. You have to practice in Lakesh, which means tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other me, while you recite it. You have to listen to one another. Because there's always the kid that goes, I'm super bilingual, so I'm going to go, tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other me, ha ha ha, look at me finish. And that's when we're out of balance, because that's individualism, right? We need to do it as a collective, right? All right, so listen, practice in Lakesh while we read. Okay, so I'm going to say in Lakesh, forgive the violence of this verb, but that's going to trigger us all to start with tu. Okay, you got it? All right, a lot of directions. All right, so hopefully you followed along. Here we go. In Lakesh. Tú eres mi otro yo. You are my other me. Si te hago daño a ti, if I do harm to you, me hago daño a mí mismo. I do harm to myself. Si te amo y respeto, if I love and respect you, me amo y respeto yo. I love and respect myself. So that was Penn, by the way. Isn't that pretty? Yeah. Sometimes the clap would start. I'd be getting my coffee down in the baño down the hallway, right? And I'd hear the students start clapping and go, "Oh my gosh, class is starting without me. Wait for me! I want to play too!" But this was our way of just starting the whole tenor of the day, because I don't care if you're first period or fifth period as a high school teacher. There's so many different spaces that our young people have to navigate just to get to your door. that you don't know what they just went through, whether their parents were beefing at home, whether the migra was beefing with some of their family members, whether they just fell in love and fell out of love in the hallway walk to your classroom, right? And all that stuff is super important, right? It's super important. We understand that deportation to a family member, that is tragic and awful, but we also remember what it was like being a teenager and getting your heart broken. Don't tell me that wasn't important. So it's all of this had to happen. This humanizing had to happen. So when our students came in, sometimes with rage, sometimes with tears, sometimes with apathy, sometimes with just bored to death from whatever they just experienced, then all of a sudden the clap and this, they were home. They were in this new, they could lay their burdens down, is what we used to say, because we're in this together. And it was also important for us. This was a principle of our classroom. So after the first day of school, I wouldn't roll out any policies and stuff. I'd say, there you go. That's the school, that's the classroom rules. Okay? Good, let's move on. Let's start reading some poetry. Or let's start reading an essay, right? And the reason that's so important for us to establish that as a start is because you just heard. When State Superintendent Huppenthal and all these local haters came after us, our students were looking at us much like you're looking at me right now saying, what are you going to do about it? Give us permission to rage. Give us permission to go and tear stuff down. Because I'm in pain and I'm tired of it. And I'm out as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, right? And that's when we had to really walk our talk. We had to find our chip. And it was hard. Because you heard how they speak about who we are. And that last Monday, we felt, at least I did, and I'll talk about it in just a second, a little bit of my humanity was finally being respected after almost 9 years of attacks that we've been doing. We're still going through it, folks. And so here's the controversial bill that we're talking about. All right? This is House Bill 2281. All right? And this passed in the same legislative session as SB 1070. And there are the 4 parameters and provisions that Santo referred to. You can take a look at it while I'm talking. This passed, like I said, in 2010, probably the most hateful legislative session in the history of this state, maybe perhaps the nation. You have the Papers, Please law, made racial profiling legal, and then you also had where anybody could be asked for their documentation or their citizenship status, if you will. And you have the end of Mexican American Studies here in Tucson, because this was the 3rd legislative attempt. And each one got a little bit more scrubbed out of the racist language. And by the time this one came to us, I was like, uh-oh. They got rid of inculcate Western values and all this other stuff that were in the original ones. We're like, what are you talking about? Right? But still, you can see how vague these are. They're incredibly vague. If you can't see them in the back, let me go real quickly. The first one is promote the overthrow of the United States government. So any program is a violation of this loses its state apportionment of funding. Promote resentment toward a race or class of people is the second provision. The third one are designed primarily for pupils of a particular ethnic group. And the fourth one, advocate ethnic solidarity instead of the treatment of pupils as individuals. All right? Now, we challenged this in court, and we won. One of these was deemed unconstitutional. But unfortunately, there's this legal term called severability. So they severed that one from the law, and kept the rest intact, which is why we were at the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals on Monday. By the way, just for kids, with 1, 2, 3, or 4, show the teacher which one you think is unconstitutional now in this state. Is it promote the overthrow of the government? 1. Is it promote resentment toward the race class of people? 2. Is it designed primarily for pupils of a particular ethnic group? Or is it 4? Advocate ethnic solidarity instead of the treatment of pupils as individuals. Okay, go ahead and make your decision right now. Make it. Let's see the fingers. Come on, go ahead. For those of you that have number 1, you're wrong. Number 3 is the winner. Yeah, so number 3. But, we have all different fingers up there. So it's like, well, I feel you. It's like, I don't know which one of these crazy people would think, They all sound interesting to me. And this is what illegal looks like. And that's what went away. And I often, so I'm an illegal teacher. They banned us from our curriculum. Everything that we, I don't know if you know this, but there are not many Mexican American Studies high school textbooks out there that you can base your curriculum on, and binders full of that stuff. You kind of have to do that on your own. So we created nearly everything that we taught. And all of that was by our district, we were told we couldn't touch. So within one day of being dismantled, we had to be born-again teachers with no curriculum, only seeing the light, the correct light of how to educate. And we were told that we had to stay away from anything that had to do with class, ethnicity, race, and oppression. Yeah, you teach American literature or American history. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm like, can I do a feminism unit? And I'm like, why? You should just do it. Don't ever ask, right? But editors beg forgiveness. But at this point, they were going to say, you will break state law. So it was way past getting fired, folks. Yeah. Because I asked that. What if I violate? Oh, by the way, they said I could. So I just got to go find a white woman. or dope men that write from a feminist perspective, I guess. Maybe that might be controversial, it's blown their mind, I don't know. But anyways, they did tell us, if we did violate, what if I teach House on Mongo Street, they're like, well, you'll be breaking state law. I said, so it's similar to like if I was inappropriate in an intimate way with a student, you come for my keys and whatnot. And I'd be on administrative leave, and I'd be breaking a law, a state law. And our administrators are kind of kept caught in the middle, so they're like, yeah, you would. I'm like, that's interesting. So that's where we're at. And I tell people often who have seen the documentary and seen us with our students, and and that's M215 right across the street at Tucson High over there, right? That's history, yo. That place was magic. And I'll never be that happy again. Won't. And each day I miss it. It's a certain kind of magic. This is a certain kind of medicine. Those folks taught me how to be the best person I could be. They held me accountable to that. And then it went away. I'll still be happy. I got kids, I got a beautiful wife, I got the lucha. But there's something about that happy that I won't ever get again. But I was real pleased with myself that during those last few years, every day no matter how painful it was, enjoy it. Because number one, we're getting overrun. Because while we were attacked, we matriculated 6 different cohorts of students through graduation. And number two, every day was a gift. And you know that when you know about those who sacrificed before you. So, speaking of this weekend, like last Saturday I was in San Francisco, we organized this solidarity event because we're going to take this lawsuit to the ninth. And so I wanted to share some of the pictures with you today. So right there is some of the original veteranos from the San Francisco State strike in 1968 to get ethnic studies at SF State. So this was a multi-generational folks. People just packed the Mission High cafeteria. Let me tell you, organizing a conference when you're not there, Carrie, I feel you, and you're not in the hometown. Yeah, you know what I'm saying, right? It wasn't a conference, it was an event, so I had a little less pressure. But man, I'm really blessed to have good colleagues here, good colleagues in the Bay that helped us make this happen. And then speaking of which, I want to try to give you some scope of the room. There's about 350 people that showed up, but don't tell them because we said like 150. We didn't know how many would show up. So we said 150 on the area reservation form. There's some Banluce there too. And then that's the LA contingent right there that's making giving a panel. And there's Alison Titigalco Cubales, who's an amazing Filipina educator in San Francisco State. You should look up her work. And then also there's Art Nelson Concordia, an ethics studies teacher at Balboa High School, and he's got his baby and he's got the wrong hat on because it's a Dodger hat. And he goes, you should know, I grew up in the Bay Area, I'm a Giants fan. I always bust his chops, right? Because we're on top right now. And he's like, you should know ethnic studies is about being who you are. Like, you want your kids taught by him, right? That's one of his twins. And then here's some of the young ones that came too. So to just show you that we had young ones there, and also there's Maya Arce right there, sitting right next to me, sitting right next to where I'm standing, and Lorenzo Lopez, Noli Cabrera, and Anita Fernandez talking about the state of ethnic studies currently, Mexican American studies here in Tucson. And then I love that picture, so I can show it to y'all. Yeah, all lives matter. Black lives matter, all lives matter. The young will put a fist in the air. And then the next, that was Saturday, and then Monday we met outside at sunrise for a blessing. We had danzantes there, and we met in a circle and we honored the 4 directions, and we gave testimony to the sacrifices of those who came all this way and before us. And I love that picture, the juxtaposition, right? Isn't that where we're living right now? You know, there's a beautiful circle ceremony right there. We're burning sage and copal and tobacco and being and understanding the severity or the gravity of the moment. The chota's always there to look after you. And those are the 2 Chicanas that led the way, right? And I'll circle back and talk with them. But on your left is Maya Arce, and on the right is Corina Lopez, and that's who the plaintiffs were in the lawsuit. And during the hearing, pretty cool, huh? Yeah, it's cool on a lot of levels. But I'm going to circle back and talk about that later. Here's some of the cool stuff that came out of the actual hearing. It was beautiful. It felt like our humanity was almost being restored while we were in that building, because they were holding the state accountable for something that they've never given us the decency to tell us why. Why get rid of a program that was so effective if it wasn't based on discriminatory animus? And that's one of the amazing moments in court. So you're telling me a Chinese American or Chinese language class would be illegal in your state? Yes. And then this one was really beautiful. Now you can go online and check out the whole hearing. It's really fascinating and worthy of young ones learning about it in civics class. And civics class should be every class in my estimation, because why they wait for, until that senior year when you're checking out to finally teach you about how your government functions is kind of tricky, right? It's kind of sneaky. It would be nice if 6th graders and 4th graders knew that, so that they were sharpened in their game, so that much like this beautiful town, at every school board meeting, students, even without the right to vote, can go up to a microphone like this and hold their somewhat elected officials accountable for the type of schooling or the type of town and city and policies that they believe they should live under or live through or survive. They should have that ability to engage in that critical conversation with older folks that vote or don't. And so one of the things that I think is really lost upon us is when we lose that understanding that every classroom needs to have this component. Every classroom needs to have this opportunity for young ones, in educational scholarship. Jacques Paris and Samuel Lean were calling it culturally sustaining pedagogy, and one of the tenets of culturally sustaining pedagogy is the access to power for youth. How are we doing that? Years before, Angela Valenzuela in subtractive schooling said that one of the tenets of authentic caring is for students and teachers, I would add, she didn't have that, but for students to have a curriculum where they analyze their structural position. That's something that needs to be in our classrooms. That's an educational component that is critical to understanding where you're at, how you live. Right? And I would think as educators, we need to do that as well. Where is our structural position? Where we need to sharpen our own socio-political analysis, because this could be you. You could be me. It's not too hard. All you need is a couple of John Hupentals. And I bet you, if I went home with you in your bag today, I can find you. So the teacher is going to take over now. And we're going to do a little assignment. And this is illegal content, so enjoy. I think this contest, Santo pointed that out. Look, we're actually okay. I'm like, that's true. We're not in a school right now. So this is an excerpt from Always Running. I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to give you a definition, and then you're going to have some reflection time and sharing time. Okay? We're going to have a little bit of writing. So if you don't have your implements ready to go, then now you go ahead and get yourself ready while I read to you. We never stopped crossing borders. The Rio Grande was only the first of countless barriers in our path. We kept jumping hurdles, kept breaking from the constraints, kept evading the border guards of every new trek. It was a metaphor to fill our lives, that river, that first crossing, the mother of all crossings. The LA River, for example, became a new barrier, keeping the Mexicans in their neighborhoods over the vast east side of the city for years, except for forays downtown. Schools provided other restrictions. Don't speak Spanish. Don't be Mexican. You don't belong. Railroad tracks divided us from communities where white people live, such as Southgate and Linwood across from Watts. We were invisible people in a city which thrived on glitter, big screens, and big names. But this glamour contained none of our names, none of our faces. The refrain, "This is not your country," echoed for a lifetime. So, I want you to think about that quote. And I want to introduce you to a definition if you don't already know. And that is, this is more of a Gramscian definition of hegemony. And so hegemony is the maintenance of domination through consensual social practices, social forms, and social structures provided in specific sites such as churches, the state, schools, mass media, the political system, and the family. And if you go back to the Rodriguez that we just read, or heard together, he's talking about a lot of these institutions, right? Couldn't see us on the billboards, don't speak Spanish, that's the education system, that's political, that's the media, mass media, right? And amongst others. So I want you to use that as a context. I quote in this definition for the following. I want you to take 5 minutes of self-reflection, quiet time, and I got the clock. And I want you to compose a written reflection about the borders and barriers in your life, your own personal life, starting with you. And at the end of that time, I'm going to say, all right, get up and go meet somebody. So I want you to get up out of these seats a little bit, cross it up, go talk to somebody else, and go share. All right? And you're in charge of what you share. So don't share what you ain't comfortable with. Right? But share something. Okay, y'all ready? All right, 5 minutes, go. Even though I did the teacher thing, I just eavesdropping. Making sure everybody was on task. So if you wouldn't mind humoring me for a little bit longer, I'd like to take this idea of place and space and borders and talk about our country. Just to kind of where we're at right now, especially with that lens of in Lakesh that kind of brings us together. And so one of the things I'd like to talk about today, during the more keynote-y part of this, because believe it or not, that stuff earlier, that was just an update, so that didn't count. But I'd like to talk about humanity. This is one of the issues, I think, in our country that we really have to think about and wrap our minds around. And I think these images might startle and remind us of the stark reality and the reasons why I probably feel humanity is important for us to discuss today. And that's Trayvon Martin, and of course Trayvon's misshapen body after he was murdered by that man George Zimmerman. And that's Trayvon's father kissing his son, something that he'll never get to do again, nor Trayvon will ever get to do with his children, and nor Trayvon's father with Trayvon's children. You know, those things that we kind of take for granted about legacy and about generations, and they get cut down quick, like Tamir Rice, that quick. And then Michael Brown's mother. These faces, they haunt us, or they should, in my estimation. They haunt me. I should probably stop using generalizing so much. Because I wonder, that old, Billie Holiday, Strange Fruit, comes to mind, right? And the story of Emmett Till. And I see that there's some folks in here that are getting canas, right? Gray hairs, much like me, or have already earned them, right? Many of us thought we'd be past this, right? Like there was this amazing, I'm going to use one bad word today, but there was that amazing picture, I didn't put it up here, but that woman in Ferguson who had the sign up that said, "I can't believe I'm still protesting this shit." And there's something about that. And the reason I wanted to end with these two young ones with the don't shoot, well, not end, but just point out, the reason I chose this picture is how long before those cute, lovable, beautiful children are seen as a threat? When is the moment when they will be hunted, or beaten, or dehumanized and marginalized? Because Black Lives Matter. And this is some place where we're at right now, right? I don't think I'm getting this one too wrong as far as like something we need to talk about, because it's not necessarily just the horrific act, right? What I want to emphasize with this humanity is, why are we having debates about people's deaths and murder as something that could be justified? That's the part that really shakes me to the core, is the noise. The noise of, well, he had it coming, she had it coming, right? Oh, did you know this? Or, that's not really what happened. This is what happened. There you go again, talking about race in this country, because we're past that. Those pictures, we want to criminalize, because it's not too difficult to understand why. Because there's a legacy in this country of white supremacy that's built on many of our institutions, and we still don't like those words. Even though I'm telling you right now, if you Google Daily Show with Jon Stewart, Mexican American Studies, you will listen to a sitting school board member who just won re-election, who's still affecting the lives of students, and I no longer have a 17-year home in my classroom. You will hear him say not only Rosa Clark didn't do it that way, he said that, right? You will also hear him say at the very end to Al Madrigal, the reporter, he said, if there's no more people left on the white, if there are no more white people left on the planet, then you can do what you want. There's not one white person left. And I like showing that today because it's the Daily Show and we all laugh, but that last phrase is white supremacy. But it flies out of the mouth and we don't catch it like that. We catch it like he's a fool. But he's not. He's accurately articulating many of the things and laws and just social mores that we've come to accept. We should not accept these things if we are human. If we were living in an in-Lakesh world, this would be as offensive to any of us, no matter who we are or where we come from. So I ask us to dig deep and look at that border barrier in our country together and wonder, how do we bring humanity back? Let's critically look at that. Let's humanize it. Let's problematize that, as Paulo Freire would say. And what about empathy? So I thought I'd stay close to home here, because you have to see, this is the narrative that I'm talking about. Yes, to 1070, we should support Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who just rounds folks up, right? Who feels like it's his job to be the migra, to be the border patrol. And then those young faces are criminalized, much like we looked at before in the humanities part, right? And then you see the narrative of having to defend our own humanity, and it's not just in Arizona; it's all the way to Georgia. Something so disparate, right? And like as far as like Arizona and Georgia have shared little history, little regional little demographics, similarities. There's really nothing there except, oh, there's some brown folks and we want them out. Now in this place where you're at, that's been a forever struggle. It's a new one to Georgia, but it's the same struggle. And I wonder why we can't look at that undocumented, unafraid, and young people like the ones you're about to see, or you just have the idea of having to, again, defend your own humanity. But looking at these young people, right? This is the Freedom 9 from summer of 2013, who self-deported themselves, who came out as undocumented in their academic rebellion. Now that picture 25 years ago, that's the future of America and a great resource. The rhetoric's different. Like, look at the potential of young people. You know what this was like 30 years ago? Why aren't you more like that, Curtis? All right, try it. But now it's illegal. Just like the classroom you saw, the picture of my classroom. Where is the empathy and understanding that these young, most of them came to this country or as babies. And this is what they did. Look at what they did. We should be proud of that. We should be patting each other on the back for having a country that can produce such amazing young ones like that. But in this state, you want to watch out. And then look at this. Even as innocuous as a baseball field, if you go to an American League baseball game, you might have to meet Chief Wahoo in all his splendor. Now, I'll give the Cleveland Indians some credit. They're like little by little, kind of, we still support Chief Wahoo. He's starting to disappear, right? But they can't make a public statement about it. And then you have this group, oh my Lord, they're just hunkering in, doubling down. And I'm thinking to myself, why do we have this in 2015, 14, 13, when this kind of exploded as offensive? And then I love the fact that other people can tell other people that they're not offended. So what's interesting is I like using sports because sometimes it could be, that's where middle-aged dudes like myself, or, getting to middle-aged, that's where we hang out with all our privilege and stuff like that. It's even better if you're a little bit more light-complected than me. But I'm half white, so I have access into that neighborhood once in a while. And so Dave Zirin said this, and it was amazing. So I'm listening to a podcast that's downloaded by thousands and thousands of meathead sports fans like me. And all of a sudden he's talking about, it's really important thing what you said about taking a second and thinking to yourself, if I was a black guy, he was talking about walking down Yawkey Way in Boston. The owner of Yawkey was awful towards, he was anti-desegregation. He was against this desegregated Major League Baseball, and it's on Yawkey Way. And what did that must feel like? If I was a black guy, how would it feel walking down the street? You don't really get people even trying to take 1 second and think, okay, if I'm a Native American person, how do I feel about this? Or if I had to go up to a Native American person and defend it, how would I explain it to them that a team called the Redskins is okay? I think the sort of it should be lack. No, I'm sorry. I think that sort of basic empathy is critical when you have these discussions. So it's great. My dad's 71 years old, right? And my dad we have a 3-year-old, and so he's quizzing Santiago on all the football teams. He goes, "Mijo, check this out." So the little Santi's Broncos, 49ers, right? Saints, Falcons. What's this one? Washington football team. So here's my dad, 71 years old. We ain't going backwards, Mijo. We ain't going backwards with this one. Yeah. So my dad and I have another story. This is 1970. Check this out. I told my dad I was preparing this for this slide for a different talk, but I thought it would fit into this discussion of empathy. I grew up in the Bay Area, so did my father, and we're both State Warriors fans. So the Warriors were once in Philadelphia, and that was the imagery. And then when they moved to San Francisco, it's not like all of a sudden there was enlightenment. There's still the headdress, right? But in 1970, right, before I was born, this becomes the image. And then the one I drew on my peachy folder and binders back in the day was that one. I told my dad, the Warriors used to have, Native American, derogatory Native American imagery. It's racist, it's disgusting. He's like, get out of here. So I showed him this. He's like, oh my God, I don't even remember that. He doesn't remember it because it was 1970. It was when I was born. He's lived some life since then. But what I'm trying to figure out, by the way, when I say peachy folder when I'm with a younger audience, boy, I have to do a lot of explaining. My peachy folder was this thing, and then a binder was, okay, let's start with this paper. Okay, then we have this thing on paper. And check, it wasn't just the Warriors, but also in the Bay about that time. This was Stanford, the enlightened and elitist and wonderful, brilliant Stanford University. So they were once the Indians, right? And then that was also the logo of the athletic club. Check that one out, right? But you see it's got a dead date, 1972. That was the year I was born. 1972. But here we are in 2015, still with Chief Wahoo hanging around and Daniel Snyder refusing to change the R word. Right? And now Stanford looks like that. Now, don't ask me to explain what the heck that is. I guess you gotta be smart enough to go to Stanford and understand that. I just grew up near there. And well, there's trees there, so I don't know. It's funny. So we're also in the and humanity and empathy is something we need to start checking in and holding each other accountable for in a loving way. Notice I said loving, because we hold each other accountable sometimes in a yelling, screaming way, and that's not good. But we also are living in this ahistorical and anti-intellectual time. And that's another border in our life. For instance, I just made you break the law. A couple times, actually. So this, if you notice the date here, this was actually, the updated version of this was January 14th, 2015. Yeah, that's like this week. And yeah, they made it not cash illegal. Yeah. Look what we did. Thank you, Luis Valdez, by the way, for penning it. You know, it's not like I penned it. I'm just a messenger, one of many. But what we said earlier today, now how absurd is that? To say, tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other me. That breaks, that's ethnic solidarity. That's something scary and wrong. I mean, something that's big, that's talking about our basic humanity and empathizing. And if you can't read that shirt, if you don't like our country, feel free to go back to the crap hole you came from. So that's ahistorical, right? And then there's all this like horrible like imagery about reconquista. I'm like, why is it reconquista? Like, you know, reconquering this part of the world. You know, the Mexicans are coming, you know. Obviously, you don't know about that. That's what Mexico used to look like. And some people never moved. And before it had those borders and boundaries, guess what? A bunch of lovely brown people walking around here. In Tucson. And in other parts of this, what we, you know, many of us call Aztlán. But most of us can just call this, right, the West Side. Western Hemisphere. Right? South Side. West Side, you know. This is, you know, later I'm going to show you some West Side numbers. So we don't even know that you're actually already in the crap hole. Sorry, buddy. I don't really agree with your characterization of this place, but yeah. And then we can be mean about it, but we rarely are. It's time to reclaim America from illegal immigrants. And then the native folks would say, I'll help you back. So so this as educators, we kind of see our charge here from these tenets. And there's one more, well, not tenet, but one more idea that I have, rather, is we also, this is time for to be loud and proud of the intersectional beauty of our country and struggle. And what I mean by that is I learned a lot from my students about, you know, Mr. Acosta, you are Chicano, but I'm Chicana, and that's something different. And I go, tell me that. Let's open up space for that. That should be what I need. Or, you know, Mr. Acosta, you're heterosexual, and I'm lesbian. And the way I have to navigate this high school is a lot different than you probably could ever imagine. And if we don't start falling in love with all of ourselves as human beings, then what are we really doing? If we're starting to parse who has equality and who doesn't, then we're just getting ourselves in a really nasty mess that isn't indicative of the ethic of Lakesh, of that principle. And I want us to remind, even though Time Magazine says something's already won, that map says no. You know, that's a lot of red that says don't bring that stuff here. So we got to keep working and struggling. And let me bring it to the women for a second. Y'all, that's, you know who that is? That's Shanika Thompson. And Shanika Thompson's story is really interesting because she was the woman shot before the 2 New York City police officers that were murdered. Now, that act is another atrocious, horrible, absurd, crazy, violent, ugly act. But what is very strange about the way media covers these acts, so is her getting shot. Now, do you know what happened to her? She walked out of the hospital in December 30th. So she's doing all right. But I didn't know either. But I remembered her. But I wonder why we don't talk about her. Is it because she's black? Or is it because she's a black woman? Because how are we treating our African American women when it comes to media and humanity and things like that? And it reminds me of my own students who are South Asian. You know, they're very rarely on the map too. We got to think about these intersectional dynamics, and then these are our leaders. These are the young ones that show us the way. I told you they would come back. So I'm their muscle, right? They're the ones that lead. Hey, you don't mess with them, you mess with us, right? Because they're the ones that had to lead this. We didn't have legal standing, the teachers, the youth did. And because these two young women have such a great relationship to their fathers, who are maestros and colegas of mine in the program, I find this empowering. Because sometimes when we split apart gender, when we split apart sexuality and all these other issues, we forget to weave it back together. It's important to split it apart and give shine to issues. Well, let's weave it back together. So the fact that these two young women found their strength from the knowledge of their home and their fathers and what their fathers did to find their own strength to take us forward, pretty cool. And 6 years ago, we were doing media for them. And then when we came down the steps, hey, it's like getting tapped on the shoulder in a slow dance. You out. We got this. It was, I went to the bathroom, because I had to hold it during that time. There's probably too much information there. But anyway, I come out, and the media's already swarming over them. And I go, that used to be me. And part of me was like, oh, thank God. Thank God. And the other part was like, check out who they are, who they become, and they shall lead the way. So, something to think about being the weekend that it is. Dr. King, right? You read that one on your own. Try to have Dr. King's voice in your head when you do. I'm going to ask you to do another bit of reflection and sharing. All right? Because I want you, that was what I think we need to be talking about. Because every one of those moments it takes place in the classroom. Every one of those ideas takes place in the classroom, right? The idea of humanity, the idea of empathy, the idea of are we being ahistorical and anti-intellectual? Where's intersectionality? Are we giving proper credit? Are we giving proper space? Are we giving proper time and shine to that? Because it affects every one of the young ones in our room and every one of us who have the unbelievable honor but also responsibility to raise them up right. So I want you to think about another 5 minutes and propose a little bit of quiet time to yourself again about the borders and barriers for your students, community, and nation. Okay, I want you to start wrapping it up a little bit. And we're gonna do the sharing at the very end because I have one more assignment for you. You know what? Frustration. So I don't have a classroom anymore, so you're in. So I want to share this as my thank you and a gift I could share, because I don't have many. But the knowledge that I have and what we use together as a Mexican American Studies collective, how we awaken the indigenous epistemologies that we in ourselves that we didn't know and learn from our elders and use it as a lens, onward to humanizing classrooms. Because it's my estimation, through the humanization of our classrooms, that's when we can tap into the academic potential and the dreams and the service and that feeling of community that our students all have. That interwoven connection that we all have together, that Inlakesh. So, along with Inlakesh, which is Mayan, it's over 2,000 years old, let's kick it with a couple more things to learn. So, if you don't recognize that, that's the center of the Calendario, or the sunstone. The Aztecs, right? The people call themselves the Mexica, so we call it Mexica. And so what you see here are you see the four arrows to the glyphs that give us the following knowledge, right? And so this is called the Nahuiolin, or the four movements. Okay, Nahui meaning four, and Olin meaning movement. So you have Tezcatlipoca up on the far right, the top right corner rather. And then Quetzalcoatl is the top left corner. So we're going counterclockwise. Huitzilopochtli is the bottom left, and Xipe Totec is the bottom right. And so you can go ahead and read what Tezcatlipoca means while I speak. Tezcatlipoca literally comes from Tezcat and Popoca. Popoca meaning smoke, and Tezcat meaning mirror. So it means smoking mirror. So the idea was the Mexica felt like It's the smoking mirror, where, that process, that actively trying to find yourself, self-reflection. Okay? It's a little bit better than, I'm looking for the man in the mirror, right? And props to Mike, but any shiny surface can be a mirror, right? But that smoking mirror has that action element to it. You have to go find yourself, not like that, quitting college, go find myself, right? Like a daily reflection, right? Like the bathroom mirror, the condensation. So, these four qualities, these four characteristics that I'm sharing with you, the Meshika thought, these are not about the classroom. This is about being a human being. And that's not the only four things about being a human being, but they're critical. Right? So we took them to the classroom. Right? So we had to self-reflect ourselves every day. As a critical practitioner, you must do that. But our students must have that time and space, just like you did today. Just to chill with oneself. No iPod, no phone, no nothing, right? Just to that quiet time to really get to know yourself. And it's foreign to them, especially this generation. Input all the time. We're a seriously voyeuristic, ADD culture. And and sometimes you need to slow that flow. Because a lot of times that goes against your own humanity. You're participating in your own dehumanization. So it's also when people start attacking your humanity, you need to kind of go into yourself a little bit too. Right? But if you stay in yourself too much, you just turn into the kids call it emo, right? So there's other elements that need to happen. So that self-reflection and that cathartic feeling of sharing that is important. But so is precious and beautiful knowledge, or Quetzal Coatl. Oh, by the way, you want to say these with me? All right. Descat. Popoca. Descat Mipoca. Beautiful. All right. So you're speaking a little Nahuatl now. We're doing a lot of languages today. And this one's Quetzal Coatl. Quetzal Coatl. Okay, now some folks pronounce the L at the end, and that's just a different, that's a different school of thought. It's all good. It's all good in the hood, man. Get it where you fit. So it's, if you want to say Quetzalcoatl, I've heard people say that too. We're learned people in Nahuatl. But the way I learned from my elders, we dropped that. So Quetzalcoatl means precious and beautiful knowledge. The Quetzal feather is that big, long, iridescent, beautiful feather, right? The Quetzal bird actually is one of the only animals in the planet that dies in captivity. It's got to be free. So the Mexica knew what they were doing. They were talking about precious and beautiful knowledge. Well, the knowledge part, the precious and beautiful, comes from the Quetzal feather. It's like that frilly feather too, so it's iridescent, it's delicate, precious, beautiful. Now knowledge is the coat, the serpent. And the serpent has the knowledge, which is going to trip you out, right? If you're from, old school Western Civ, and you got a little bit of a Christian background, right? Because, you're going to think that the snake's evil. But on this side, west side, the snake don't hold all knowledge. Why? Because it's closest to Mother Earth. Every day, it embraces her. And she has all the knowledge. Tonantzin. So as it goes through from the day it's born to the day it dies, it's embracing Tonantzin. You and I only have our little patitas right here. Now, if you want to get down on the ground and get with Tonantzin, that's cool. Right? People are going to look at you funny. But that's what this means, precious and beautiful knowledge, right? So we learn everywhere. We learn in the cocina. We learn in building houses. And we learn in the garage, under the car hood, right? We learn all over the place, right? We learn from all different people. Everybody has knowledge. So you bring that to the space, the classroom space. Because it's not just the knowledge when the bell rings, it's the knowledge of your life as you live it. That means your elders have just as much respect that you should give to the professor. The professor, Nana, what's the difference? They're human, they got knowledge. I want all of it. And that's precious and beautiful. And having time together, I used to make my students look at their hands. Look at your hands. Look at my little soft teacher hands. Look at this air conditioning we're in. Don't tell me that this is hard. All right? You know what's hard? Pounding nails into an A-frame house right now. Or cleaning up after us in the bathroom. Those are honorable jobs. Those are good. People do hard work. That's honorable. But it's hard. You and I got it easy. So we should honor them with this moment of precious and beautiful knowledge. Sometimes you got to do the check. Witsi lo pochli. Witsi lo pochli. Witsi lo pochli means the will to act. Okay? So once you gain knowledge and you've been self-reflective, sorry, it's not that clean. It's not linear, it's not Western. But as you do these things, you also need to act them out. That's the emo part. That's when we get all like kind of constipated in the movement, right? But I have all this, I am guilty, I have white privilege, but what do I do? And I always say, get your butt out in the streets, do something. We're waiting. We are waiting. Don't hand wring, right? Don't be sad by yourself, eating the Oreos and watching TV. Get out in the street. Go do something, right? So the will to act, right? It also symbolizes the sun coming up in the wintertime. Now, in Tucson in California, where I grew up, that's like not a big deal. But one time I went to Connecticut and I said, it's like sun coming up in the wintertime. They're like, yes, that is the will to act. Yes, resiliency. We will make it through this winter. And I'm like, oh man, Michigan knew what they're talking about. Because these people out here in this cold place, they know. And so we must have that. So that, the will to act is what our students, we expect of each other. So that means with the states that are taking your classes away, you must do something, right? And then you try to be positive and progressive in that, as you do that, and that's part of Luis Devotion. Shipetotec is transformation. Now check this out, those of you that like Frere and like all this stuff. Isn't it crazy? That like in this old document, right? You can go down to DF, right? Down to Mexico City and see the big giant sunstone. And know that Pablo Freire, hundreds of years, 1,000 years later, was in Brazil, and he had some of the similar things. Not the same, but similar. And in my opinion, both those similarities give us strength as human beings. We're like, yeah, that's cool. Bell Hooks is talking about this too. Bell Hooks might not know about the Nahualin, but she does. There's that wisdom out there. So Shipetotec is transformation, right? That idea of the snake shedding its skin. It's dramatic. It's beautiful. It looks painful. It reminds me personally when I see that on those Discovery Channels of childbirth, right? Beautiful, painful, beyond. That's real transformation. So we have this idiom in English that's like turning over a new leaf. Well, this year I'm going to turn in all my homework. I'm going to go to every class. Turn it over a new leaf. And then that leaf blows over. And it blows over, it blows over, it blows over as soon as the wind picks up. Real transformation that we need to know about ourselves is hard. We need to honor it. So when little homie gets a class 2 days in a row, and that's like a big deal, get a little homie proud. Like, yeah, that's transformation, God. Right? Because he's going to be in the space where he can get that precious and beautiful knowledge, where he can reflect upon him or herself, where she can now think about the way she wants to act upon the world in a loving, positive, progressive, and creative way. So this is what I do now, John. This is what I did and what I do. So I'm trying to take this framework and put it into teacher, methodology. So, we can do that. We did it. And that was, in my estimation, was the key. What made y'all different? It was rooting ourselves on the ground. Now, you don't have to use the words and dive deep into the culture to understand. So you don't have to do Mexican. We don't have to do one simple drop, test to say who can learn from each other. If you're born on this globe, this is your history. Right? If you're from here, and by here I mean this planet Earth, this is our legacy to share with one another. And then you spit me whatever you've learned. But the idea is this, in my estimation. If you have these components rocking in the classroom, it goes outside the classroom too. You will cultivate an opportunity for young people to know who they are. And for you to begin to know who they are with them. And begin to know who you are, because that's the way it happens. We don't sit on high at a lectern like this and watch everybody evolve and ourselves not evolve. We should be about that business. We should be rolling up our sleeves and getting our hands in the masa and really working with our youth to know who we are. Because if we stand way up on high and we're not on the ground with them, we're going to miss out on how the world's changing. And the world's changing and blending in a beautiful way. It's pluralistic. This America that we are now, the idea of being a biracial kid like me, I was a half-breed. I was a hybrid if they're being nice. I was mixed. But now we have words for young people like that, because that's where the world is already gone. So we got to catch up. And we got to catch up by doing this work with them. This world is transforming. But what are we about? Are we about living in that? Are we about these borders and barriers that we've been talking about all the last couple of days, splitting us apart? Or are we about breaking them down and putting us together? Finding that common humanity. And I guess tú eres mi otro yo. So I've been fortunate to get off my feet. I'm working with some folks all throughout the nation in trying to how it works, because this works in any context, right? So what I want you all to do is this is homework because I don't have time. But I want you to do this. I want you to use the Nahuatl. I want you to actually apply it to your life, right? So here are your options. I want you sometime, either on the plane today or whenever you have a chance, I want you to take a moment of self-reflection to encapsulate the experience of these days. Just be with yourself. And what new ideas and knowledge have you learned that is precious and beautiful to you? Who gave you some quetzalcoatl this week? Right? Okay, write it down. Give them props. Email them maybe or whatnot, but just activate it. What actions are you committed to engaging upon your return home? Where's your Huitzilopochtli? You've got to do something with this momentum. You've got to do it. It can't just be something you learn and it becomes disembodied. It's got to be through your body when you go home with your people. And you got to make it work. You got to transfer that energy and this love, this knowledge, and this self-reflection so that we can get to that transformation. How can the experience from the time in Tucson help you in your pursuit for personal and social transformation? So that's all I expected. And believe it or not, I would say that to 14, 15, 16, and 17-year-olds, and they blew my mind. Because it wasn't just, it is funny to say, but it's an honor to live and to watch and to be a part of it. And it was an honor to be with you today. So I want to end with a couple of quotes. If you want to contact me, it's really easy to do. That's like something. It's really easy to do. Check it out. Curtis.acosta@latinalearning.com, or you can just go to the website and find me. I always forget to do this because it's much more fun to be in the masa. So anyway, this is going away, but 2 quotes. Number 1, Pablo. Because love is an act of courage, not fear. Love is commitment to others. No matter where the oppressed are found, an act of love is commitment to their cause, the cause of liberation. Carry that with you this weekend. And of course, we can't end this weekend without the good doctor. It's my favorite part of that speech. Not my favorite speech, by the way. Beyond Vietnam, that speech, the Riverside Church, that speech is dope. It's also banned in Arizona because of my curriculum. He talks about the demonic suction tube. Ooh! He would be hated if he was allowed today by this new American. This is no time to engage the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. So don't do that, y'all. Take the Spirit with you and go. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.